Hey y'all, what's up and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be doing a Bible study on the book of Jonah. This is going to be a video that is in a larger series on obedience, how to be more obedient to God, and why we need to trying to start to shift our relationship with obedience. A lot of times we think of obedience as punishment. We think of it as very restrictive. We think of it as, oh my gosh, if I'm being an obedient Christian, that means that I have to wear a skirt down to my ankles and I can't do all the fun things that other people do because I love God. That means I have to be sitting in the house by myself, secluded, on my knees praying. That's not what it means. Okay. Obedience is actually the structure that God gives us in order to experience his abundance. It's the set of rules that we have to make sure that we are in alignment. And I'm going to actually give you a little bit of back history on the word obedience because it's a Latin word. Okay. And I did do this in all the videos in this series, but obedience is actually a word. It originates in Latin as obedier, Obedier. The prefix of obedience, ob, which translates to toward, meaning if I'm facing towards you, I'm facing this way. If I'm facing not really towards you, but not necessarily away from you, I'm facing this way. Or if I'm not facing towards you at all, I'm turned around, I'm facing this way, right? And obviously I can't hear if I'm facing this way, okay? So obedience, obedier, the ob stands for toward, and the odir, the back end of obedier, translates to hear, meaning that obedience requires hearing first. We can't be obedient to something we haven't heard. If you calling my name, telling me to turn around, and I'm facing this way, and you saying, Kelly, 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 hello, and you saying, this girl is not listening to me, girl, I can't even hear you. Okay? Forget about being obedient. I can't even hear what you're saying. So obedience means that we have to be facing in the right direction, but it also means that we have to have our ears open and we have to have the ability to hear. Okay. And so as we go a little bit deeper into this series on obedience, I want to do a Bible study with you all on the first chapter of Jonah. Now, you may have already known about Jonah, like he's the homie that got thrown into the sea and he was swallowed up by a whale. If you are new on your journey to reading the Bible and you're like, he did what? He got what? We're going to explain. Okay. So Jonah is a prophet and he was called by God to go to a city called Nineveh. Okay. He was called to go to Nineveh and tell the people, hey, listen, you know what? Actually, you know what? I'm just going to read y'all straight from the book. Then I'm going to read you straight from the book. And then I will give you the Ebonics translation. Because I almost skipped over. We ain't skipping over the text. That's not what we do around here, okay? All right, so Jonah, book 1, chapter 1, and Jonah's a very short book. It starts with verse 1 that says, the word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai. Verse 2, go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it because its wickedness has come up before me. Okay. But Jonah ran away from the Lord and headed for Tarshish. So this happens real quick. It's like God comes to Jonah and says, I need you to go to Nineveh and tell these folks that they're not doing the right things. And Jonah says, you know what? I am not going to do that. I'm going to go the other way. So in verse 3, but Jonah ran away from the Lord and headed for Tarshish, which is another city in the opposite direction. He went down to Joppa, where he found a ship bound for that port. After paying the fare, he went aboard and sailed for Tarshish to flee from the Lord. Verse 4 says, then the Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break up. All the sailors were afraid, and each cried out to his own God, and they threw the cargo into the sea to lighten the ship. So he paid these people, got on their ship, then they get caught up into a storm, and all the sailors on the ship, they don't worship God. They worship their own gods, right? It says it right here. They start throwing over the cargo because they're like, okay, if we want to survive this, we're going to have to lighten this ship up so that it's, the ship doesn't break into pieces. So they're literally throwing all of their belongings overboard to lighten the ship. But Jonah had gone below deck where he lay down and fell into a deep sleep. While all this is happening, Jonah is asleep. The nerve, first of all, the nerve that you run away from God. Then you think you finna get on this ship and sleep? Boy, you crazy. Verse 6, the captain went to him and said, how can you sleep? Get up and call on your God. Maybe he will take notice of us that we will not perish. So at this point, they are so scared. They have abandoned all reason. They're like, okay, we all serve different gods. We called on all of them. We need you to wake up and call on your God, okay? Because somebody's God gonna answer. Then the sailors said to each other, come, let us cast lots to find out who is responsible for this calamity. They cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. So they asked him, tell us, Jonah, who is responsible for making all this trouble for us? What kind of work do you do? Where do you come from? What is your country? From what people are you? So at this point, the sailors have found out it's your fault. You got on this ship. Now we're in a storm. Like, what? Who are you? Like, what? How did you even cause all of this? The sailors are trying to figure out. Verse 9, he answered, I am a Hebrew, and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land. This terrified them, and they asked, what have you done? They knew he was running away from the Lord because he had already told them so. So now the sailors are like, what did you do to cause all of this? Because this is a lot, okay? Verse 11 says, the sea was getting rougher and rougher. So they asked him, what should we do to make the sea calm down for us? Like, what do we need to do? Verse 12 says, pick me up and throw me into the sea. So Jonah says to them, just throw me overboard. And he replied, and it will become calm. I know that it is my fault that this great storm has come upon you. So he's saying, you know what, at this point, I don't even think calling out to my God is going to help because I know what I did. I know that he told me to go do something and I didn't do it. So at this point, I think if y'all want to live, y'all should just throw me overboard. That's what Jonah says. Okay. Verse 13 says, instead, the men did their best to row back to land. So at first they was like, we don't want to throw you overboard. We're just going to go back to where we came from. But they could not, for the sea grew even wilder than before. Verse 14 says, then they cried out to the Lord, please, Lord, do not let us die for taking this man's life. Do not hold us accountable for killing an innocent man, for you, Lord, have done as you pleased. Verse 15, then they took Jonah and threw him overboard, and the raging sea grew calm. Verse 16, at this, the men greatly feared the Lord, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows to him. Verse 17 says, now the Lord provided a huge fish to swallow Jonah. And Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. Okay. So that's what happens in the first chapter. Lots of stuff, lots of action. Okay. So they throw him over. They like, see you later. And then they apologize to God. They're like, we are so sorry. And they begin to worship God because now they know who the one true God is because they threw him overboard and the sea calmed down. And so they were able, as sailors, I don't want to jump ahead of myself, but the sailors were able to have an encounter with God because of what happened to Jonah. Okay. So if you're running away because you don't want to be used, joke's on you, you're going to be used anyways. But I have a couple of observations that I want to share with you guys. I have 5 things I want you to know about this chapter. And I encourage you to go read the book of Jonah because it's literally only 4 chapters. In my Bible, the book of Jonah is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pages. It's 7 pages. So it's a very easy place to start if you're trying to get back into your Bible study. But here are my observations. The first one, God called Jonah to take up for him and to warn the people. So a lot of times we think about judgment as a bad thing. Like I live in the South. I don't know where you guys are from, but I live in the South. So when we talk about judgment, it's like you going to hell. Like it's people coming to you and saying, girl, you was out the club last night. You going to hell. Like that's judgment. Okay. And that's like very like aggressive, but I live in Georgia. Like when you meet a Bible thumper, it is aggressive like that. And I consider myself to be a Bible thumper, but I'm real chill. But that's not judgment. Okay. Judgment is you actually being warned. Judgment is forewarning. It is like, here's what you're doing. Here's what is probably going to happen to you if you keep going down this path. But at any time you have the decision to say, I'm going to go a different way. That's what judgment is. Okay. And so in verse 1, chapter 1, verse 1, we see God telling Jonah, go tell these people I'm about to raise the wickedness. It's about to be a whole hot mess up in here because they're doing things that they're not supposed to be doing. Now, here's the part that I did not get, right? Because I grew up in church, so I've heard the story of Jonah a million times. But here's the part that was missing for me, right? It's not just that God said, go judge the people, go warn the people. It's that Jonah is an Israelite and the Ninevites are Gentiles. So they don't even like each other. So it's not that God said, go save your friend and tell her to stop going to the club, or go tell your friend over here she need to stop drinking or whatever. That's not what it was. God called Jonah to warn his enemies. He called him to go try to save people that he didn't even like. So while we don't get a lot of context, because verse 1 literally says, go put the judgment, and then verse 2 says, and Jonah ran, like he ran the other way. We don't get a lot of information of what happened in between when God told him that and when he decided to run. But what we do know is that from past historical accounts in the Bible and from history, the Israelites don't like people who are not Israelites. And so for God to say, go warn your enemies, go judge your enemies, that's a big deal. Like, we're not just saying, Jonah, he ran. I would never run from God. I know better than that. No, you don't know better than that, because you make the decision every single day to not do what God has called you to do. Like, if you're watching me right now, you're watching this video, it's because you're having a hard time actively every single day, consistently being intentional about doing what God is calling you to do. So there is a little bit of Jonah in all of us. And whether that means I'm scared to do what God's called me to do because it involves me being nice to my enemies, it involves me saving my enemies, or whether I'm scared of doing what God has called me to do because I'm scared that other people are going to judge me, or I'm scared, I have a fear of success, or I don't know what people are going to look at me like seeing me do what God has called me to do. There's a little bit of Jonah in each of us. And so I think I love that it starts with that, and that we actually get to see, wow, God's not just going to use you for the people you love. He's going to use you to save the people that you don't love too. Okay. So we got to start transforming our mind from that aspect. The second observation that I see is that it says, while Jonah was asleep, everyone else was freaking out. He was literally under the ship taking a nap while the entire ship crew was throwing stuff over the edge trying to save the ship. Just because you ignore the problem does not mean the problem doesn't exist. Like, you're still called to obedience. Like, you're still called to do what God told you to do. You can walk around acting like you don't know what it is, but you know what it is. You can walk around acting like you haven't seen the signs, but you know the signs. Your lack of giving it attention does not make it any less important than what it is. Okay. And so if you think, I'm just going to go take a nap, because a lot of people do that. I'm the president of the nap committee. I love naps. But when I know that I am in a grind season, I'm in the mud season, I am in a waiting season where I am trying to exit and I'm about to make a transition, I'm not taking a nap. And I'm not saying don't sleep. Definitely get your sleep. Okay. 100% get your sleep, because if you're not rested, you're not going to be able to show up fully. But don't choose to go lay down when you know there's something else that you should be doing and you have the energy to do that thing. Okay. So just because you ignore it doesn't mean, and you have that discernment, right? You know yourself. You know when you got your foot off the pedal, when your foot should be on the pedal. You're like, when your foot should be on the gas, you know when you sitting with your legs crossed, when you really should have your foot on your own neck. Like, you know what that looks like. Okay. The second observation I want to share with you guys is from verse 12. And in verse 12, it says, verse 12 is the portion of the chapter that says, pick me up and throw me into the sea. So this is when Jonah says, just throw me over, right? I'm going to tell y'all this. Ultimately, there is no easy way out. He thought, you know what? Just throw me out of the sea. Not because he wanted to save the other people. He wanted to be thrown out to the sea because he thought that would be the end of all his problems. There is no easy way out. Okay? There's no easy way out. So you need to start taking responsibility and ownership of your calling. And just saying, this is my calling, is not a replacement for obedience either, right? So you have to take the ownership, but you still have to take the action. Because there's a lot of y'all who are watching this. I'm coming for y'all head today. It's a lot of y'all watching this that is like, I know exactly what God has called me to do. And like, you still not moving. Why are you not moving? Why are you not taking action? Why is there not an intentional portion of the 24 hours you have in your day? Let's just talk about the hours that you're awake. Let's say if you get 12 hours of sleep, well, let's say if you get 12 hours of sleep and waking up in the nighttime routine, 12 hours. You have 12 hours of active, alert, awake time. 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Often you have actually a little bit more than 12 hours, but why are you not having every single day intentionally time set aside for you to spend with God, increase your spiritual discernment, and increase your spiritual discipline, and tap into what it is that God is calling you to do? Why? Because you're spending 40 hours at a job. Okay, that's cool. You got to live, you got to pay bills. You still got a whole bunch of other hours. So if you have at least 2 or 3 hours outside of getting a full night's rest, your wake up routine, your go to sleep routine, that you're spending time with your kids, and your actual work hours, you have at least another 2 or 3 hours. Why not? Just because you know what it is and you have come to terms with what it is that you're called to do, that is not enough. We're talking about moving for a God who gave his only son for you. And this is what you came up with? Come on now, get it together. This is a coming to Jesus. Please get it together. I just want you to think every single time, especially if you're a mom, if you gave up one of your children, what would be the level of expectation for those who are indebted to you? Like, let's just be real. Let's be real, right? And distraction. I see someone saying distraction in the comments. Yeah, distraction. We are using our time to do things that are not getting us closer to fully living out what God has called us to do. And it's crazy because when you think about it, it's like we're doing all these other things, all these other distractions are usually things that we're doing because we want to be happier. We want to feel happier. We want to be, maybe you want to be like healthier, or you want to make more money. We're doing all of these things trying to hit goals, when if we use that time to just step into what God has called us to do and to intentionally make progress and action and step forward in that, we would get all of those other things by proxy. Like, we would experience abundance simply by being obedient. That is literally all it takes. Facing the right direction, hearing what God is telling you to do, and taking action will give you all of the obedience that you desire. You don't have to start another business. You don't have to pick up a side job. You don't have to do this over here and this over that, and agree to do this and volunteer for this over here and da, 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 da. Like, if it is not getting you closer to walking out your purpose, if it's not getting you closer to fulfilling the vision that God has placed in your heart and in your mind, it is a distraction by the enemy to get you off track so that it takes you longer to experience the fullness and the abundance that God truly has set aside for you. Think about that. Anytime you think, I should go do this, I should go do that, ask yourself, is this actively getting me closer to fulfilling the vision that God has placed in my heart and placed on my mind? If it is not, it is a distraction. And you know what? It becomes a lot easier to tell what is a distraction and what's not a distraction when you have an increased level of spiritual discernment, which is another video that's in this series you guys can go watch. That video is called 4 Reasons Why You Can't Hear from God. Go watch that video, because I talk about in that video how to increase your spiritual discernment by increasing your spiritual discipline, which allows you to be easier able to say, nope, that's a distraction. I can't do that. Yep, that's going to get me there. That's going to get me there. Because all the things look good, but is it a good idea or is it a God idea? Use your spiritual discernment, okay? My fourth observation Comes from verse 13. And in verse 13, it says, instead, the men did their best to row back to land. Baby, they tried to go backwards. They said, you know what? We don't really want to throw you over, Jonah. Now, they probably weren't this calm, but I'm like, we really don't want to throw you over. So we're going to try to spare your life because we know you're an innocent man. We don't want to kill you. So let's just try to row back to the port where we came from. Let's try to get back to where we came from. God said, nah, it's too late for that. Okay. Verse 13 says, instead, the men did their best to row back to land, but they could not, for the sea grew even wilder than before. Once you're in the storm, you cannot go back the way you came. Don't think you can just backtrack and I'm going to get back to where I was. Like, no, that's not how it works. That is not how, you can't just go backwards. Once you in this thing, you're in this thing. And some of y'all are in this thing. And you're in the storm so violently, and you're like, why is everything hitting me all at one time? Why is it raining? Why is the boat rocking? I'm having to throw over everything that I brought on this boat. All the assets, all the things that I had, all the money, all the things that I have bought that I thought I was going to be able to keep. I'm having to give these things away. I'm having to sell these things just to stay afloat. I'm trying to save the boat. And I'm trying to save my life, and I'm not understanding what's happening. You have a Jonah on your boat, baby. If you're not Jonah, you got a Jonah on your boat. So you better start looking around. You better start casting lots up in here. Who is it? Because you got to get off this boat, okay? I don't care what type of relationship we have. I don't care how much you paid me to be on this boat. If we start casting these lots and I find out it's you, we have to have a face-to-face conversation about what you're causing in my life right now. Because you're causing a storm in my life right now. And it's not even me. It's because I let you on my boat. Some of y'all got to get some people off your boat. Now, if you Jonah and you like, you know what? It's me. I'm the problem. I'm the drama. It's me. I'm the one. I am the common denominator. Everywhere I go, I'm in a storm. But the people are changing. The sailors are changing. The type of boat is changing. The things that I'm having to throw off are changing. The things I'm having to let go that I thought I was going to be able to hold on to and acquire, I'm having to let go of these things over and over and over again. If you're the common denominator, you're Jonah. And while it may seem like, you know what, I'm just going to throw myself off this boat. Y'all could just throw me off. It's cool. I can abandon ship. I'm just going to quit. It don't work like that. I'm just going to go back to where I came from. It doesn't work like that. Because what happens when they threw him off the boat? The sea calmed down, but he got swallowed up into the belly of the whale. It was not an easy out. He still ended up having to go back to Nineveh. Now, we didn't read this part, but he still ended up having to go back to Nineveh. But guess what did happen as a result? Everybody around him became a follower of God because they were able to have a God encounter because of the storm that they went through. So while to you, it feels like I went through this storm, I lost all of these things, all these people, all these friends. I have no way to get back to where I came from. I literally threw myself off. I quit, and I'm still in the dark place. Because he went from being in a storm to being in a place of isolation for 3 days and 3 nights, total darkness in the belly of the whale. He didn't know if he was going to come out or not. He didn't know if he was going to die or not. At that point, he didn't know, right? So he went from a storm into immediate isolation. You threw yourself off quitting, thinking it was going to make everything peaceful, and now you're in isolation and you're wondering, what was the point of this? Somebody else probably got their deliverance out the back of what you just did, like those sailors did, right? But this is your wake-up call. You're in isolation now. This is your wake-up call. The only reason why Jonah came out of the belly of the whale is because he repented. And chapter 2 is that whole thing. It's him having to come to Jesus saying, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I ran. It's like a face-to-face. It's like everything is being revealed. And he's repenting and saying, I'm sorry, I can do this. I'm ready. That's the only way you're going to get out the belly of the whale. He was only in there it only took him 3 days to do that. But it may take you 3 months to do that. It may take you 3 years to do that. And I'm praying to God, if you're watching this, it does not take you that long. But honestly, I've met some people and I'm like, you've been in the belly of the whale for 3 decades. You've been in the belly of the whale for 3 years. I've worked with people. Y'all know I'm a business coach and a mindset coach. I've worked with people 3 years ago that if I had a call with them today, they're still in the belly of the whale. Wow, nothing's happened for 3 years. You've been at the same point in your business, the same point in your life. You're still having the same problems. It's time to get real, and it's time to repent, and it's time for you to wake up. This is your wake up call. You've been thrown off the ship and you are in the belly of the whale. And if you want to get out of this thing, you're going to have to go back to God. Like, you book this call with me. And I am a coach and I can give you a strategy, but that strategy is not going to work in the belly of a whale. You're going to have to get out first. Okay? You're going to have to get out. You're going to have to get out first. And my last observation for the Bible study on Jonah, book 1, chapter 1, comes from verse 17. And that's the verse that says, now the Lord provided a huge fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. Even when Jonah gave up, God still saved him. Y'all be thinking that isolation means that God doesn't love you, and y'all be thinking that isolation means that he took everything from me. Baby, that isolation saved you. I remember being in some places and being like, this is the ultimate punishment. Like, I have nobody. My life is over. There's no one here. And now I look back and I'm like, that saved me. Being by myself, losing those friends, losing those people, having nobody to call saved me. I needed to be in isolation to understand who I was. Come on now. I wouldn't even know if I was made, what I was made of, if I wasn't in isolation. I would have no idea. I would not understand the power of God if I had not been in isolation. Because like when you're in isolation, you don't realize when you come up out of that thing, you know, like nobody but God. Because no human could have pulled me out of this. No human could have pulled me from rock bottom, even back up to barely keeping my head above water. Nobody but God. Isolation saved some of y'all. Because the people you would have called would have drowned you, period. The ship would have went down. Like, the people that you would have called that you thought was your friends, baby, they would have threw you over. Even when you give up, even when you've been disobedient, even when you didn't listen, even when you literally ran the other way, God's still going to save you. You're still going to have another chance. We done. That's all for, I don't have nothing else to say. We done for Jonah. We only went through 1 chapter, but y'all got basically 4 chapters. But if you want to go read Jonah, I highly encourage you to go read Jonah. Okay? Make sure y'all like, comment, and subscribe. I'm getting off my soapbox for today. This is going to be a really good series. I just really feel like it's going to be a really good series. This is going to be the first video that comes out. So just stay tuned for the other one on why you can't hear God. I also have another video coming on steps to become more obedient. And we're just going to dive a lot deeper into, like unlocking abundance. Like seriously, on a whole new level, just understanding what can happen just by doing what God has told you to do. And it sounds so simple when I say it like that, but it's like a whole new level gets unlocked.